Hello, friends. Wow, a beautiful Wisconsin day. A little unseasonable.
Yeah, it's the end of January and it's 40 something Fahrenheit,
Oh my
and
goodness.
there's no snow, and there hasn't been snow for a very long time. And though I think it feels really nice, I do think we should have some moisture. Everything is starting to blow away.
Yeah, very dry. It wouldn't surprise me. I took kids out this morning to learn maple trees and for our adventure club. And it wouldn't surprise me if we broke off a twig if it would leak sap today.
It it could be the beginning of the maple syruping season. We just have to see what happens. So, gosh, yeah. So in a way, it's kind of like sunshine and warmth. No, we need winter.
Sometimes you need winter. Snow, the stuff that, well, out here in the country, of course, snow is pretty awesome. But in the city, I often hear from people like our parents that snow isn't quite as exciting because it just gets all mushy and
Muddy.
but still even that snow it does something good.
Yeah.
Replenishing the aquifers,
It restores things,
it
gets it
restores.
ready for
Yeah.
the cycle of growth. Makes me think of our human lives and how we seem in our culture to have begun a new cultural myth, which is that we must always be in summer, we must always be in harvest, we must be perpetually doing, and must have productivity, and we must build and grow and more and never actually rest or stop or replenish.
Yeah, arguably for a long time in human history, we lived in communities where we just had a steady state. And it wasn't all about growth and building and bigger. But that's kind of the message. In fact, our some of our governments are built on that idea that we have to have continual growth.
I think it's that our economies are built on growth.
Right, right.
It's interesting because you say um, we talk about the steady state, but I think back to a lot of our more primitive and ancestral living, and that was definitely not a steady state. But in a weird way, I think it was more stable.
Mm.
We had nomadic people who would follow the pattern of the herds and the weather and the wintering grounds and the summering grounds, and the some of the native peoples here, like the First Nation people, that would have their wild ricing camps, and they would have their various different seasons. And it makes me wonder, how in our modern world do we get to a place where we can replenish, or we can just be in a creative place where we're just brainstorming but we don't necessarily have to put something into action, or we can just lay low and enjoy for a moment where we're at.
Yeah. It's funny. We had a subject we were going to talk about, which I can see how we're coming at that subject peripherally.
Oh yeah.
But we're also coming to that subject, the other one we discussed, which was nature and the way that I was thinking of our inner nature
Mm.
and just how there's a lot of things like this that our cultural message is that something is bad, but there's these huge gifts waiting in it for us.
Yeah.
So I think we can get to our original, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
because when we think about,
Well,
yeah,
it's all tied together, and I think where my mind is going is in this concept we haven't really explored a whole lot, and it can be extrapolated into all sorts of facets in our life, including our spirituality. Um, but is, how do we draw a line? How do we have a boundary? How do we say, no, I need this instead, or no, I don't have any more output, or um, no, I'm choosing this avenue? How do we start to get into a cycle of our own?
yeah. And I think this will be a fun exploration because I haven't really at least thought about it much. And this has perennially been a difficult one for me. It's very easy for me to say yes. I, for many years, have been very much a people pleaser type of person, which, if you're the same, you know that can lead to a disingenuity, a non-sincerity when we say yes when it's not a real yes. And it comes out perhaps from good desires to see somebody smile and be excited about something. But
it can also cause issues
it really can.
because we can have that servant's heart, but if we also aren't centered, then we can begin to accept things, say yes to things, participate in things, but then our heart actually isn't in it. And then I think that we as human beings, we're very perceptive. I mean, that's how our children, when we're children, that's how we learn, is through the art of perception. And so I think that there's that understanding of that. And we may even know people, you may know people in your life where you don't always know if what they're saying is actually what they mean. And that isn't necessarily because they're not a nice person, it's simply because maybe they have fallen into that trap. And so you aren't sure. Yes, they've offered to, pick up your laundry and do the dishes and whatever. And yet, because of the past, you wonder, well, the last time that happened, it didn't go so well.
Yeah.
or there's this feeling I get, and that's a completely different conversation. But so the question is, how do we make space? Because I do think that I won't necessarily say space, because sometimes what you need is I need to not sit on the couch and watch a movie with all of you, though that sounds fun. I need to go for a hike, or I need to, work on the art that I'm doing, or whatever it is. How do we come to that space where we have a reprieve from that idea of constant productivity, that idea of my value is what I accomplish, and just a being state? Because I think the bottom line is that the more that we're in a being state and the more that we are in a present awareness state, the more that we can feel kind of what's real. We can feel Divine Mother. We can feel and see things far more clearly from that state.
Yeah.
So in a weird way, the more we say yes to things that we don't really want, the more we start to, our life is frittered away by the details.
This is really hitting home for me right now because, as you probably know, so I teach martial arts and wilderness skills, and somebody recently, I met with them. They're so interested in the martial arts. We did a little bit together, and they have a natural affinity for it. And in the heat of the moment, I kind of said yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then started reflecting. We have long-term students coming up, and realizing there's no way I'm going to be working with these long-term students, working with my current students, and take on this other person and have room left in my life for being. And I could probably do it if I just did. But I'd be neglecting you. I'd be
You'd
neglecting
be done then.
my children.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be paying attention to the things that supposedly you work for.
Right.
Right?
And then if you follow that to its furthest, then you eventually don't have the presence for that individual that you really meant to have. And so in the end, you thwart your intention.
So you're not even doing something nice for that person, even though it can feel like it when you have that urge to say yes.
Yeah.
But it's hard for me.
It's a super challenging thing. But there's a couple of things that I feel like are useful tools. So we're going to take them as useful tools to think about. And I come back to that cyclical nature of the world, and I think about seasons. And I think just because you can't work with this person right now does not mean that there won't be a season in the future. And our life has shown that in a lot of different ways. We've had times where we've moved away from a place, we thought we'll never see this place again, and then the very next year, we're living in the same place and we're getting to enjoy it. How about Indra? Never thought I would see that horsey again, and now here he is. I think the more that we're open to understanding it, or maybe not understanding, but just we're more open to it being a possibility, that things can circle around. And then that leads me to the heart of it, which is what I call divine timing. And it's helped me immeasurably, whether or not it's a truth of the world. It's helped me to believe that there's a right moment. And by right, I don't mean, the right one, just that Divine Mother is on my side. And in a way, I can allow that if something doesn't happen, that there's a story playing out, and that in a way it removes all of that rumination for me. And I can think, okay. And a lot of times once you start living with that divine timing, you start getting signals and you start feeling things, and it becomes easier for you to kind of go, I don't feel that in me. It doesn't seem like the right season for that. Or you get a message, oh, everything is lining up. Yeah, this feels like it would be easy and it would replenish me, but it's getting there.
This brings me, I guess, to the idea of boundaries. And this is something that I've always had an intuition, maybe it'll happen right here, that I can come to an understanding of. But I've never liked the idea of boundaries. I mean, from a practical sense, I can see why they're important. We need to have these boundaries around us.
We're talking about personal boundaries versus physical boundaries.
Yes.
Which physical boundaries also don't make a lot of sense, but that's a different topic.
Yeah, we're talking about the personal boundaries that we put around us. And, some wise people I know insist that it's really important to have these boundaries in place. But there's always been something inside of me that says, in creating the boundaries, and this happens with so many things, we're creating a system within which the boundaries will be challenged and broken, and we're going to spend a lot of time defending our boundaries.
Well, the other thing that comes to mind with boundaries, but I think we have to go deeper into the concept, is when there's a boundary, in a way, it's almost, to me, are we getting too windy? Oh, you're just getting warm.
No, I'm going to protect our thing, yes,
okay.
In case it's getting...
Hopefully it's not.
So, you can keep talking if you want.
I think you'll be... Are you going to be on the leaves?
Look at that.
Can it still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So for me, the issue that I have with boundaries, well, I can understand the flip side, but we'll go there in a second, is that in drawing boundaries, in some weird way, it signals to my mind and my consciousness that I'm done with that. Like, this is the edge where I've come to, that's my boundary, and I will not entertain any other ideas. And so in a strange way, it makes me feel as though I'm constricting my life, and it does the opposite of feeling like I'm protecting myself. It makes me more feel like I'm shielding myself from potential magical or otherwise events, because I begin to groove that boundary idea, in my neural pathways.
Yeah.
And then I feel like when we do that, that's where we start to get the blinders that don't allow us to see outside. I'm sure that obviously we can go beyond that, but I'm just saying that I have this weird setup in my head when I start to think about creating a boundary.
Yeah. That's... we were talking the other day about systems, how we humans, we love to overlay systems onto the organic whole. And there's part of me that thinks that we can just arise to each situation. And at least we will do as well as we would if we had boundaries in place. Because if we have boundaries in place, then we're going to be asking ourselves, oh, is somebody crossing that boundary, using mental things here? Okay, they did. Now I have to confront that. And pretty much the same thing will happen if I just take each situation as it arises. But I feel like if we just take things as they arise, I'm going to interact differently. It's as if, I place a little line here, and I'm just kind of watching you to see if you go over that line, over that boundary. And then, in a way, I create that system. And I'm using mental energy watching that, observing that.
Yeah.
And can I just arise naturally?
I think the idea of creating boundaries is to be helpful, especially for those of us that have that tug of wanting to do more and help more and be people pleasers. I think that we talked about this the time before. We want an answer, and so a boundary is a simple answer. But in reality, as you're pointing out, it's far more complex. Each situation is its own situation. And so I happen to wonder if the same could be true. This is a thing I say all the time, is just paying attention. So if we just bring an awareness to what is going on, I think we get into trouble when we shift out of our awareness. So we're working with this person, it's really exciting, they seem so happy, and you think, yeah, this is a person I could work with. And then you don't have, suddenly you get outside your awareness, and this is in a good way. And you then commit to something that you weren't actually getting the feel for, maybe.
Yeah.
And if we had more awareness, but that is more work, right? Having a boundary, I have a clear boundary, you do this, you're out. Just really quick from the boundary perspective. So I understand it from one side. From another side, being on the opposite of a boundary, it does make me feel like an us versus them sometimes. And I'm imagining, what does it feel like when you've crossed someone's boundary? It's really tough because maybe you didn't even know there was a boundary there. So it gets tricky with that. And so in a way, boundaries are also work. They seem like they're not work. It's a simple solution. Seems like meeting every situation with awareness seems like a lot more work. And yet I think in the end, that has more simplicity and maybe more elegance to it, because it takes all the things into account. And I think there are some things that we might never say yes to, and yet if all the circumstances were right, we might. Or vice versa.
Yeah. This is it's one of the biggest things in Divine Mother's play, in her Maya, is that we humans are free to create these systems, and we forget we create them. So, we see it happening all over the world. There's boundaries between countries. And these boundaries are a line, and they're just a consensual imaginary line that humans have drawn. And then we spend enormous amounts of resources defending these borders, these boundaries that we've created. Remember reading something by that astronaut going over the Earth and seeing, oh, wait,
Yeah.
Look, there's no lines.
Right.
This is just one planet.
Yeah.
There are other perspectives. There are other ways we could have done this whole thing, and other ways we could do this whole thing. But once we draw a line, it's almost impossible for us not to see it as a God-given reality. But Divine Mother didn't draw that line. We humans, in the freedom to create our systems, we draw those lines and create the rules. And then they become real. And boy, it takes energy.
Well, it seems like they become real. But let's talk about the history of our planet. Sorry, but the lines have changed
They change a lot.
incredibly given enough time. So all we're talking about are minuscule details here, and we're really, really getting distracted by those details. I think coming into a place of asking ourselves why we would want to set up boundaries in the first place is perhaps a way to look at something. And why. So for me, I maybe would set up boundaries because I tend to say yes to too many things. And why do I say yes to those things? You know, if it is from a place of wanting someone to be happy or whatever, for me, it boils down to a lot of times I feel like I'm not enough if I don't make someone happy. And that my responsibility is to be the best person I can be, and that means making sure everybody's happy. And I think that I have to rewrite that for myself. This is my personal journey into realizing that kind of no matter what, in Divine Mother's eyes, I am already enough. And also, from her perspective of her playing me, the life that I have is enough. And that doesn't mean it can't change, but I could be okay with what is right now. And then I can start to ask some different questions. I don't have to want to please this person and want to please that person in order to feel like I'm a good person. I don't have to make sure I make this much money and I impress these people in order to show that I'm a good contributor to society. I am just enough, even if I am blind and deaf, right? Helen Keller, what the world has been so informed by her life, and yet one could have said she wasn't enough, right? So asking ourselves deep down, why do I need to draw boundaries, and then going to that place and taking Divine Mother there with you, because perhaps in acknowledging whatever that is, you can start to honor and love yourself and Divine Mother as who you are. And maybe from there you can start to be a little more, bring that awareness of that to your present moment and start to offer yourself opportunities to pause or to not say yes to something. And I always appreciate when someone's upfront. If someone said to me, "Oh my gosh, Rebecca, this sounds so amazing, and I want desperately to say yes, and yet I just really want to spend some time with my family this weekend, and so I'm going to say no." That is, to me, that's a great way to express everything you're feeling. And I think I would really relate and respect that person.
Well, part of what you're talking about there, I think, is questioning the systems as a whole. And if we do that, we start to unravel Maya. We start to unravel the illusion and start to see, okay, these are things that I've created, I've accepted as realities. What if I'm looking at that, when you talked about, looking at that root of why am I drawing boundaries in the first place? Not just where should I put my boundaries?
Right.
Let me work within the system. But what are these? Why am I doing this? And it brings me back again to just that naturally arising to the situation. I'm going to guess with this person that I said yes to, if I have a correct beat on them, that when I very honestly tell them no and why I'm saying no, without making excuses or but just really being honest, that it's actually going to create more of a connection with this person.
Yeah.
And that there may come that divine timing, that season, when I do end up working with her and it turns into something really cool. But we have to step back out of that system that we've created and into a different kind of trust and a different kind of letting go and flowing with all of this. And I think this is a super important step on the path with Divine Mother, because these systems, they kind of blind us
Yeah.
to this. We feel it when we're out here in nature.
Yeah, a lot of that people pleasing or whatever else that we're trying to do, the cultural goo, can fall away from us. And, nature is nothing if not pretty honest. I mean, obviously, there's camouflage and other things, but you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. Uh, I don't feel like trees pretend to be other than what they are. But there's a feeling in nature that you're kind of getting just what's right there.
Yeah.
And then it's very much easier to step back. And so, that's a great way sometimes if we're questioning what to do, maybe before we say yes or before we say no, we say, I just need a 10-minute walk or a 5-minute sit in a natural place. I'm really just going to check in and pause for a moment, because I think that is another part of our conditioning is instant gratification. We need to have the information immediately. We need to have a yes or a no immediately, and our minds are very uncomfortable with uncertainty. And so the more that we can sit and hold an open space and a curiosity in that uncertainty, I think the more that we'll, we'll be able to feel the right path for us in that moment.
That takes a different kind of approach to life, doesn't it?
Yeah.
One that maybe we can all explore together. A trusting, exploratory, curious, I love that word that you used, curious approach to life.
I think it just takes practice. Whatever we practice becomes what we do.
Yeah.
So doing, value based on productivity and accomplishments, these are all things that were put onto us and created almost as habits for us before we had the ability to understand whether or not what they were and whether or not we wanted them. And so this is, in a weird way, just rewriting that and saying, hey, I want to make this my practice. This is my spiritual practice, is to look at the world in this other way. And the more that we do it, the more that will be the thing that jumps in. That's the course that we'll take. That's the way we'll look at things. Be present, be aware, invite Divine Mother in. And so, in some ways, I find that heartening. It doesn't have to be a gigantic task, it's just every little time that you need to, you just stop for a moment and, you do that. And then pretty soon it's the way that you approach things.
Creating new, I don't know, habits or pathways or.
Yeah. So that is the part that maybe does take a little work. That's why maybe it feels like there's an effort, whereas just a cut and dried, okay, here's my boundaries. You don't. There's still work, but they're a different kind of effort.
The boundaries seem easier, but end up
Yeah, as you
taking
said,
a lot more energy.
lots and lots and lots of energy. So, I think we're curious to hear from you. Uh, I mean, the idea of boundaries, that's there's merit in all sorts of different ideas. And so we'd be curious to hear your experience with that, your experience with creating a space for yourself that can be a place where you can connect more with the divine. How do you allow for that in your life? If you're a people pleaser, how is that going for you? What's your journey? This is where we get to help one another along the way.
Thank you for joining us today.
I'm sitting on a log and now I'm kicking my feet, and it's very pleasant.
That's nice. Huh?
Yeah, it's so great. So beautiful. We should go enjoy the sunshine.
Let's do it.
Okay. Thank you so much. Mwah, mwah.